Hello friends and welcome to Smart Coach. Today we are dealing with a very important topic as far as your studies for competitive examinations is concerned, okay? And the topic is the civil disobedience movement. All right, a very important topic indeed. The dates are 1930 to 1934. Okay, and this video will be of course treated in parts because it is a huge chapter. We will be doing the first part, which will include part 1 will of course include the causes of the civil disobedience movement, okay, and then we will look into the events culminating into the civil disobedience movement, the various events or various congress sessions that took place which culminated into the civil disobedience movement, what caused this movement, all of these aspects we will learn in this video, okay. So let us dive into it. One of the most important reasons behind the civil disobedience movement, as was an important reason with most of the movements, political movements in India for freedom struggle, was constitutional reform, okay, constitutional reform. Now, the 1919 experiment with diarchy, it had failed, okay, and it had failed miserably, and the British government were willing to accede to the fact that 1919, the Government of India Act of 1919, it was a failure, and therefore they were going to introduce new constitutional reforms, and for this purpose, the Indian Statutory Commission was formed, okay, which we have talked about in a separate video. That is the the Simon Commission. However, as you know, the Simon Commission was a all-white affair, okay. There were no Indian or no native, representative within the Simon Commission, and it was not something which is acceptable because you are trying to promulgate constitutional reforms in India. If you don't include native opinion within that kind of a constitutional, within that kind of an idea of constitutional reform, how will the Indian people be able to accept it? And therefore, this was the stance of the Congress as well. And another important thing that you have to remember is the fact that the Simon Commission had not made any mention of dominion status, all right. So, dominion status, which was a very important demand of the Congress, okay, or of the Indian public opinion at that point of time, it was completely rejected by the Simon Commission, all right. You see, dominion status, which was a very important demand of public opinion within India at that point of time, it was rejected by the, the recommendations of the Simon Commission, and therefore the British government had to come up with various face-saving tactics, such as Lord Irwin's declaration that the British government in India is moving towards, or it is working towards, granting dominion status to India, all right. And there was also the publication of the Nehru report done by done by Motilal Nehru, or the all parties representatives, all right. And all of this led up to a demand for constitutional reform, okay. However, the shape that these constitutional reforms would take, this was a very great issue, all right. This was a very grave issue. The how or what kind of constitutional reforms would actually take place. Now, by the 1928 Calcutta session, there was already a demand within Congress. The Congress has already made a demand to the British government. It has passed a resolution, all right, in the 1928 Calcutta session. It had already, made a demand that India should be granted dominion status, all right. India should be granted dominion status, and this should be done within a limited period of time. However, by the Lahore session, all right, by the Lahore session of 1929, the Congress demand for dominion status has changed into the demand for Purna Swaraj, okay. Now, this also constitutes an important cause for the civil disobedience movement, because with the Purna Swaraj demand which was made in the Lahore session, the entire balance of affairs, it gets tumbled, okay, because now they are not asking for just dominion status within the empire of Britain, but they are asking for complete independence from the British rule in India, all right. And therefore 26 January of 1930, was also celebrated as the Independence Day of India. So the people were ready to be independent from British rule in India, and this shows the mentality of the politically enlightened of India and also of the masses of India, all right, because people were now no more willing to subject themselves to British rule in India, okay. And as far as the economic and social causes are concerned, you already know that the British were exploiting the economy of India, and there were various there movements which had prepped up the society within India for such a prolonged and protracted movement against the British. The arrival of Gandhi has already changed the whole political scenario, and now satyagraha and mass movements have become the base of political movements within India, and therefore we see that by now India is primed for a protracted, prolonged movement against British rule in India, okay. So when you are mentioning the causes, please also include certain certain long-term causes, okay, and this you can do in your long format answers. This you can of course do by incorporating them into the conclusion, okay, or incorporating them into the introduction itself, okay. So moving forward, we also see that revolutionary terrorism, all right, revolutionary terrorism, of course, terrorism in this context is not in the pejorative, that is we are not it is not used critically. It is just a word used to categorize certain activities or political activities within India. Revolutionary terrorism had come up as a great force, all right, of protest against the British, okay. Organizations such as the HSRA were leading this movement within British India, and Bhagat Singh and Batukeshwar Dutt had already bombed the central legislature, okay. So these kind of movements are also taking place, and the repression that the British instigate against the revolutionary terrorists, it also results in a great hue and cry from within India, okay. Jatin Das, he had already died in British imprisonment because of the prolonged fasting taken up by political prisoners within British prison, all right. So these kind of activities are also taking place, and it has also incensed the Indian masses. Under such a political scenario, what we see is that Gandhi puts up 11 demands, okay, 11 demands to the British Viceroy, okay, that is Mr. Irwin, okay. So Gandhi puts up 11 demands to the Viceroy. These include such demands as the most importantly the abolition of salt tax, okay, abolition of salt tax, and the British monopoly over salt, all right. Now salt becomes a very important focal point of this movement. Why? Because it is not just an object, but it has very great symbolic importance, because it connects with all strata of Indian society, okay. It connects with the masses, it connects with the politically motivated, and it connects with also the educated intelligentsia, all right. So therefore we see that salt is taken up as a symbolic representation of British oppression within India, all right. Now another demand that was put in place was 50% reduction in revenue, okay, or land revenue. And there was also demands made on reservation for coastal shipping, Indian reservation, all right, Indian reservation regarding coastal shipping, all right. There was also a demand for the reduction of exchange rate in rupee pound ratio, okay, exchange rates of rupee and pound, all right. There was also a clause or a demand made for the protection of textile industry, all right. And then there was also a demand made for 50% reduction in army expenditure, military expenditure, all right. 50% reduction in the expenditure on civil administration, all right. There was also demand made on the release of political prisoners, all right. And there was demands made for changes in the CID, all right, or CID reforms we call it, and there was also a demand made for the change in the Arms Act, all right. Arms Act, which had prohibited Indians from prohibited Indians from wielding arms or owning arms. Okay, so these were the kind of demands that were put on the British administration. Okay, these were the kind of demand that was made by the by Gandhi on the British administration. It also included another point which we should make is the prohibition of alcohol. Okay, which was a very important part of the Gandhian agenda. So we see that these 11 demands that were made, this appealed to different sections of Indian society, because when the planning was done for making these demands, it was done in such a way that it can rope in the maximum number of participants within the civil disobedience movement. So the first two we see that it appeals to the masses, or which were the peasant masses of India, okay, the agricultural masses of India. Then the next three appeal to the bourgeois or the petty bourgeois of India, and then the rest of them are of general concern to all Indians. Okay, so these kind of demands were made on Lord Irwin, and when these demands were not met, we see that the Gandhi goes on with the, or proceeds forward with the Dandi March. Okay, Gandhi's Dandi March, and this begins the civil disobedience movement in earnest. Now, the civil disobedience movement and its course is very interesting to look at. There are various stages which we will have to look into when we are studying the course of the civil disobedience movement, and it will also include the Gandhi-Irwin Pact. This is very important to remember, that within the civil disobedience, within the ambit of civil disobedience movement, the Gandhi-Irwin Pact also takes place. However, there is a separate video for that, you can consult it, all right. But we will also be talking about the circumstances under which the Gandhi-Irwin Pact took place. The Roundtable Conference, the second Roundtable Conference also takes place during the civil disobedience movement. Congress participates in that Roundtable Conference. We will be talking about all of these things in our next part of the video, and in the third part we will be talking about the consequences of the civil disobedience movement and its significance to the history of India. Okay, so with that, I hope that the process towards the civil disobedience movement is clear to you. Okay, the various stages in which the civil disobedience movement progressed, and the causes behind the outburst of the civil disobedience movement, or the outbreak. Okay, so with that, I take your leave. I hope that the video is informative to you, and I hope that you will be working hard. Thank you.